All right, boys and girls, welcome back. Brand new Take Aim podcast. And this week I have Blake Garrett on with me, and Blake shares some of his best tips for shed hunting. Super excited to have Blake on. It's been a minute, so always exciting to talk with him. But Blake's actually up in South Dakota at the moment doing some coyote hunting. But we cover a bunch of tips in this episode on how to become a better shed hunter. So it's that time of year. It's 1st of March. Most of the deer are just about dropped, will be dropping here in the next week or two, so get out and do some shed hunt. Hope you guys enjoy the show as always. All right, guys, we are live, brand new Take Aim podcast, and excited as always to have my buddy Blake Garrett back with me. Somewhere in the world is Blake Garrett, so what's up, man? Where are you hiding?
I'm in South Dakota right now. We're down here shooting some coyotes for a couple of days. Just decided to get out of Missouri, have some fun here before it gets too warm and coyote hunting kind of, winds down. So I'm just trying to have a little bit of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's cool. Let's talk about coyote hunting for a minute. But how are you guys kind of doing it? Just running callers during the middle of the day or nighttime?
Yeah, no, it's all daytime stuff. Just pretty much, starting at daylight and then running through the day and just kind of, we change up some tactics as we get to the middle part of the day. As those coyotes go and lay up, usually find some thick stuff. Or out here, a lot of times you're laying out in the open, but just kind of some taller grass. But it's sort of pretty rough country here, so it's just about getting around on them without them seeing you get in there. And then, just running electric collars, mouth calling a little bit. And we've had pretty good success on just about everything. We played some distress, we played vocals, killed them off of both, and had pairs come in, had singles come in, had 5 come in. It's just all kinds of guys out here, so it's pretty fun. Yeah,
that's cool. So who are you hunting with up there?
Heath Baker is out here with me from Alpha Dog Down. He came out, he had some time in his schedule, so we just got together and ran out. This is actually a place I turkey hunt some and deer hunt some out here with Joe McDougal, and he's got like a 7,000-acre ranch here that has just about all kinds of game on it. But he called and said, man, I've got a bunch of coyotes this year. They're just everywhere, and you want to come out and shoot some of them. So we threw the trip together real quick and kind of made a little 3-dayer out of it and try to help them out a little bit if we can.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of one of the major goals for kind of all of us is that, for deer management wise, to take care of the predators, and it's kind of undervalued, so I know you hunt so much, you see the value in it, and it gives you something to do in the off season as well.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it gives you a little bit of fun. It's kind of I know we're going to talk some shed hunting, but I'm still kind of stalling out for that. So it gives me something to put my mind on for a little bit before we get back to that. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I figured it'd be a great time. I know that you haven't really kicked off, shed hunting yet, but you're probably close, like in the next week or two, I'd say, Blake. But I figured we'd just go over some of the rules you have and maybe a few that I have, even though I'm in Michigan and it absolutely sucks here. But I still have some general rules to follow to shed hunt, so yeah, I figured we'd start there.
Yeah, so the biggest thing for me is like nothing happens before March.
Right. Okay. You usually wait till I know you have kind of exception or outlier because you have multiple properties and some big ones, but do you do some I'll call it pre-shed hunt scouting? Like, are you looking for deer via from the car or trail cameras that, are they still holding or are not?
Yeah, absolutely. We really, really monitor our deer a lot. Obviously mobile cameras help that a lot for just up-to-date stuff where we don't have to go in there. But you got to remember that really we're feeding a lot right now. So we're in the farms every 5 to 6 days, dumping feed and redoing that. So it gives us a chance to kind of check the cameras and get a pulse on where the deer are with dropping horns. And, we've seen a big jump in just different farms. You wouldn't think it, but a farm that's 1.5 miles away from another farm. I have a farm right now that every deer except for maybe a couple little forkers or spikes on it have dropped. And, the farm that's 1.5 miles away, 1.25 miles away, still has 90% of the bucks holding both sides. So a lot of that, it's not so much area as it is kind of really where the rut is. And, when those bucks' testosterone levels get to a certain point, they'll just drop those horns and they just come off in a day. And I think those farms that, hold longer have a little bit later rut, it seems like, and really a better food source. And all those things kind of play into it. So, a lot of guys try to put the pulse down on what's going on Facebook, and unfortunately, I would tell you that the best way to do it is, get some feed and put it out if you can. And even if you just run, one bag just to try to get some trail camera pictures, or just run cameras, wherever you can, but really try to monitor those cameras, because for us it's really about specific deer that we're trying to, wait for them to drop. And there's usually 2 or 3 deer on each farm that once those 3 have dropped, we'll just go in and start looking for them, because we don't want those horns laying out there. But for the most part, if I waited till every deer dropped, I've got some forkers and, like say, spikes and little basket rack deer that hold all the way through March, all the way into April.
Yeah. One thing that I'll kind of add on to what you said there was some will hold longer than others, and you mentioned the food sources. And it seems to be that some of those connections equate to overall deer health. And I've always heard, and you probably have heard this too, Blake, that it's actually such a great thing when you see some of these deer into March, or near March, still holding antlers. That means that herd health, that deer's health in particular, is super healthy. And sometimes that has to do with the ease of food, or being able to maintain food into that diet in these winter months.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's just overall, and we've noticed that the date always pushes back. It's usually like, early February or mid-February on normal farms that we don't feed at all. And then on the farms we're feeding now, it's almost pushed back a whole month, But the deer have a lot less stress, and they hold a lot, they hold their antlers a lot longer when they have a lot less stress and are more healthy, just like you said, so.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's that stress level. And, what a difference what you just said. That's a whole month versus some of the other farms that you're not feeding on. And I would go as far as to say that that's probably the norm on any farm that doesn't really have the food compared to somewhere else that does. You could add and subtract that month either way pretty easily.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really cool tip that Blake just shared was that, you're trying to single out the deer that potentially you're going to hunt the next year or this current year, let's say. So you're really kind of on those deer until you think they've dropped, and then you get in there right away just so they don't get lost or chewed up, or varmints, are moving them, trying to get them up a tree and hide them to eat them or whatever. Right. But we both know it doesn't take squirrels or whatever long to kind of gnaw those things down. So I thought that was a really good tip, is try to maintain that presence there till you see them, and then just jump on and get on it right away if the weather's permitting.
Yeah, absolutely. I go as far as, me and we talk about the OCD stuff, but I'll go as far as trying to find identifiers for a buck when I get daytime pictures of him. So, my late season pictures of him, I'm going through trying to find what patches of hair are gone, if he's got any markings that are odd on his nose. A lot of people don't realize, but if you look in a whitetail's nose and where their mouth is below their bottom jaw, there's always some different markings that they have, and every deer kind of has its own individual black spots, white spots, that kind of thing. You look around the eyes, there's things there. Obviously, you're looking at ears for rips and stuff. Those are the easy ones, but I can't tell people how important it is, in December, if you're getting pictures of a deer, January, to save the daytimes of him, and then you can go back whenever those deer show up without antlers, and you can 100% identify that this is the deer. I know he's dropped now, and I know I'm safe to go in there.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I know, Blake, that this might be a little more on the optimal side, and you have that, with your situation on some of the farms that you've had historically year after year. But let's say, have you noticed that with a certain deer that gets to be 5, 6, 7 years old, that you find those sheds maybe in the general same area?
Yeah. I've had deer that I've found sheds within like 30 yards of each other from year to year for that time of the year. So it's obviously we know their nature's a habit, or creatures of habit for the most part. they're going to do the same thing. And if you do the same thing, keep them on schedule like I always do. We always feed at the same time. We feed, same time of the year and all that. It kind of, depicts their movement, moves them into what bedding area they're going to bed that's closest to that food. And then you just ultimately, they're doing the same thing that they've always done. It's almost like if you're going to drop something, you're going to drop it in your house at somewhere. I mean, that's where you spend the most time, So
right.
It's not necessarily right taking the same steps, but if it's his house, that's where you got to find it. And anytime we look at shed hunting, shed hunting, there's no real secret to it. It's just a matter of where does he spend the most time. And, you can't control a lot with what a whitetail deer does, but you can control his food. And you can, honestly, if you can hinge cut and stuff, you can even control his bed. But you can, the more you can control in his movement, the more you can really know where those antlers are. And you kind of trim it down to where you're not wasting time walking a bunch of stuff when okay, he's here, to there. And Big Time just dropped a blog that I did with just kind of how I incorporate feeding into it. But really just a matter of, the feeding part just simplifies things, because when we're able to provide a food source in a 20-foot circle that feeds, 50 to 100 deer, it's a great place to start with sheds. You know what I mean? You start there, and then you kind of just work your way back towards the food or towards the bed. And you're going to, I'm going to say 80 to 90% of them you're going to find somewhere between that corn pile or that Big Time pile and that staging area right there or their beds. Every now and then we get an oddball, those deer at night go out into the big crop fields and eat, and we get some oddballs out there that, we'll find on the four-wheeler and stuff. But for the most part, if I can, exclude the pile, exclude the bed, then I know there's only one place it could be, and that's going to be out in that field. And so, you just kind of get intentional with your time and really save yourself from walking your legs off.
Yeah, right. No, that's a great point. And, one thing to talk about, Blake, is when you set up those feeding stations or whatever you want to call them, areas like that, you probably have tracks everywhere. So I assume you already know, some of the directions of the bedding area, but do you just take off on, the main routes from those trails coming in and out to where you guys feed, or do you plan that just based on what you...
No, we'll do that for the most part. But I tell you what, a lot of times for me, I wait till snow, and I kind of log that information. A lot of people kind of sleep on snow, and you get a snowfall, though, it's just so that it tells you everything. You know what I mean?
A lot,
it tells you
for sure.
Every step, everywhere, everything that goes on with it. So I always pay attention. When I get a good snow, I just always kind of bookmark that in my brain of what those deer are doing, what movement they're doing. I always try, obviously you try to watch the camera and see which way he's coming in and out of for the most part. But the benefit of, late season is that, you're going to get snow. And every time I go in to feed with that snow, I'm going to watch and see where that trail goes, or if I know where his tracks came in, kind of where they come from. And those are ways I identify, kind of where we head. But for the most part, if there's no snow and I'm at a pile, there's going to be a trail coming out of it heading into the timber, and I'm going to follow it until really when you follow those trails back into those bedding areas, what they do is they just kind of disappear. You'll have a great trail that leads in, and then it just kind of gets less and less and less and less. And what that is those deer just kind of breaking off and bedding. So as you follow it, kind of where that trail ends in the timber is probably where you're going to be, where your bedding's going to be.
Yeah. So from there, Blake, let's talk about that for 1 second. As that trail kind of dissipates, what do you look for as far as to say, this is maybe the first set of bedding area that I'm going to investigate, or the second one? How do you identify those?
So we just start, realistically just start smashing them as much as you can with just walking and trying to do circles and zigzagging them and kind of working your way back. And it's hard for me to tell you because it's tough. Everyone's different. You know what I mean? Every bedding area is different. I've got some that are super, a lot. We hinge cut, 4 years ago, and there's a bunch of, rose bushes in there, and those are kind of, you're just checking pockets that are in there that the deer lay in and trying to just work your way through it. But there's also big ones, that are almost like grass or CRP stuff, and those are going to be ones that we try to get the four-wheeler out of, or really, really, thoroughly zigzag it through. But For the most part, I mean, it's just a matter of locating where that is or where you think that is and just trying to zigzag. And it's just about focusing, kind of narrowing the search and focusing time.
Yeah, for sure. Now, do you ever, totally separate from the properties you hunt, Blake, but do you ever just go to, a piece of state land or like a nature preserve type of park that's open to the public and just shed hunt?
See, I don't. I know a lot of guys that do. For me, I just the cool part or the takeaway from shed hunting is always the fact of I know the deer and it creates a history with them.
Right.
So I don't get as much enjoyment out of just walking to find horns, unfortunately.
Finding random bone.
Yeah. I mean, I know a lot of guys do, and that's awesome, but it's just not. For me, I would use the term of I'm not that mad at them. Like I just don't.
Right. Yeah.
For the you know what I mean, for the walking and the time and the effort it would take for me to do it, I wouldn't get rewarded, I guess I should say, or wouldn't take away as much as I probably should from it.
Yeah, for sure.
By any means.
So, what would be, Blake, the maybe the easiest shed you've ever found on the farm?
Oh, I've had a couple that popped on mobile camera at the pile.
Oh,
and
man.
literally I was at home and I was like, yeah, I guess I need to go get that. So the next day I went and drove down and picked it up. But we've had them. I've had them pop on mobile camera, and then I haven't been able to get to them for a couple of days because of the mud. And I've had dogs carry them off. I've had coyotes carry them off. Coyotes lay there and chew on them. All kinds of stuff. So yeah, it's kind of neat to see what a horn actually goes through sometimes because
wow,
it's pretty unbelievable that we had one that was on camera, and like I said, there was a coyote that came in, laid down, and chewed on it for a while, and then carried it off, and then carried it back on into the camera frame.
That's
and
hilarious.
Then a dog came by and carried it off, and we thought it was gone, and I ended up finding it like 15 feet behind the camera.
No kidding.
The dog just dropped it. Yeah, absolutely.
So that would be by far the easiest that you've ever found, but what would be maybe one of the most unique places you found one?
I found a couple like hangers, and you see them sometimes. Guys post them on like Facebook and stuff where they'll be in a tree, legitimately like the deer was rubbing the tree, and they just break off or just come off right there. I found a couple of those. I'm trying to think. Found one in a road in Kansas where they were crossing the road and it was laying in the middle of the road. And the other one was actually on the other side of the road and the other side of the fence. I guess he just jumped the fence and then it fell off in the road, and he jumped the other fence and then it fell off. But it gets some oddball spots. I mean, that's the thing you always got to remember is that they can lose them at any point. So it's no surprise that they're not easy to find. You know what I mean? It's just there's just some that you just can't find.
No, there is. I mean, and one of the reasons I want to talk to you is you're on the, positive side of the shed hunting equation, but really when you think about it, if you weren't feeding and maintaining what me and you have spoke about like a ritual all the time, it's almost like finding a needle in a haystack. It's exactly that phrase because, like you just said, dogs carry them off, a coyote hits it. I mean, who knows where they could be, or just a random like crossing the road and it fell off his head in the road as maybe he was going to his bed or going to a feed field.
Right. Yeah, I'll tell you the most sheds I've found, honestly, is off the four-wheeler. Off the four-wheeler and crops. That's probably the most I've ever found.
Like in a single haul, or just you're saying the majority of your shed findings? Just
the majority of the sheds I've found have been that, but I've also probably covered the most distance when you really look at it on a four-wheeler in crop fields. Do you know what I mean? Like it's just, because that was the old way of finding them for us is like before we were feeding, obviously that's the food, so that's where you spent your time and that's where you started, and you had to, kind of map that whole field, and then you work back into just the bedding areas that we knew back in the timber, but it's a thing if guys have the accessibility to get a four-wheeler into a big crop field, a cornfield, whatever the best food source is, and you can scout. I mean, it's the same way as hunting. You can scout those. You can look for those. Ultimately, I think if you're a whitetail hunter, you need to figure out where the food source is, and that would be once you figure that out, then that's where they're going to spend at least half of their time or some of their time. And a good part of their time, so it's worth checking. But a lot of guys see, a 100-acre cornfield, and they just can't walk it all. And you're just going to murder yourself to do it. So if you have the ability to get on a four-wheeler or something, electronic bike, anything to where you can save some energy but still, move around in that field and kind of grid it, you'd be surprised what you find out there, because there's a lot that I think are overlooked out there in those fields.
Yeah, there is. And I think that those fields, especially in your area, Illinois, Iowa, those fields really tell you a lot. I mean, it can tell you entries and exits. It can tell you what part of the field they like to feed in the most, even though we know they're browsers or grazers. They're going to move all over. But, Blake, or me and you both know, like, they'll come out in a field, and it always seems to be there's a part of the field the deer really like it. And they'll hang there, and then they kind of migrate to somewhere else. So, all those are really good tips and things to look for, because that will tell you, again, if you're not familiar with that area, that maybe this coming season, that's where the deer really like to hang out in that part of the field. Maybe they're protected from the road or the two-track, even from the farmers. But there's stuff like that deer do every single day that we really don't, key in on, and that's part of their survival.
Right, absolutely.
So, on the four-wheeler, Blake, do you have any tips for using that to your advantage, or in a big, let's say, a big crop field? Are you just covering maybe the first 50 yards from the edge of the woods, and just? No,
I'll zigzag the whole thing. I mean, there's so many apps out there now you can use, like Onyx and stuff, where you can really control it, or just kind of keep an eye on it. But I'll do the whole thing, and you really want to make sure when you're looking, and especially in like a cornfield, you're looking down the rows, not across them. Obviously, you're going to see a lot better, a lot farther, and those sheds are going to stick out a lot more when you look down the rows as opposed to across them. So.
Yeah, for sure, you're right. Yep. Now,
I'll almost run it long ways, as opposed to you almost want to drive it down the row. Does that make sense? You want to put your tires down the rows, and you don't want to do that, because if you look off to the side, you're looking the opposite direction. Essentially, you're looking across the rows. I would drive it the other way, to where I'm actually driving across the rows. You know what I'm saying? To where I can look down.
So you're going row by row,
right,
instead of
vertically.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
And you're saying the advantage to that is you can see multiple rows left and right side.
Correct, and you can see a little farther. You can make it a little wider.
A little farther. Yep.
Yep.
That especially makes a lot of sense if you're using that, like you said, in a zigzag, because it allows you to grid that a lot better than, going lengthwise down and then back up.
Absolutely.
Down.
Yeah. Yep.
For sure. But those are all good tips for sure. And, one thing that, I mean, if you listen to this podcast already, what Blake has said and we've talked about here today is basically make a plan. Like, it sounds like, Blake, that every time you do this, you kind of already have a plan that, like, hey, you're going to hit this today or that today, and there's some sort of method to the madness.
Yeah, absolutely. And we walk the farm in sections. I walk it in pieces. I don't have enough energy to thoroughly walk a whole farm in one day. You know what I mean?
No, it's a lot. It's a lot.
I mean, a lot of the bigger ones. I mean, to walk it right, I guess I should say. Like, if you put yourself on a schedule and you don't allow yourself enough time in shed hunting, you hurry. And I've always found out that if I can take my time and do it right, and just not be rushed, I find a lot more sheds that way, because they're not easy to spot. You got to take your time and pay attention to what you're doing, and it helps if you're not just cramped for time and thinking, I got to get to this other spot, or I got to get to this other spot. If you can grid it out and you say, okay, I'm going to walk the south end of the farm today, and then I'm going to walk the north end of the farm tomorrow, and you're able to do that, you allow yourself enough time to really do it thoroughly.
Yeah, absolutely. And, another thing is, once you get going and kind of do it, I really think you kind of get to the point where your eyes and your mind get a little more trained, because like Blake said, they're not easy to find. Like, I mean, they are exactly the color of all the stuff they're laying in the ground. It's legitimately like one of Mother Nature's camouflage tricks, They're not easy to find, and it takes that practice. But one thing, like you're just saying, Blake, is don't get overwhelmed. Don't say we're going to try to cover 500 acres today, because, man, I wear a Fitbit, and it would blow your mind what I could do in just 80 acres, how many steps. You're close to 5 miles in 80 acres. It would blow your mind, trying to cover it all. And you could, like you said, you could literally beat yourself up so bad that you won't show up the next day to finish the rest of it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. You don't want to do that. Like, it's like anything else. If you're tired and you're out of shape and you're just not going to see as well. You're not, you know what I mean? You're just not going to be as observant. You're going to miss things. You just don't want to be like that. You got to be on your A game when you're out there, because it's a matter of, they're not easy. Nope.
No.
I've seen many guys walk within 5 feet of a shed and never see it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there is something to it too, like, I don't know, genetics and everybody's eyesight. It seems like, I could put as much time and effort and be rested as somebody else who can find 3 in that one day, and I'd find none. Some guys
right.
some guys are born with like the golden eye for sheds, I swear to God.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So, well, one thing before we jump off, Blake, I got one more question I wanted to ask you, but have you ever used or worked with a dog to find sheds?
I haven't. I did train a dog. The dog I have now, I did train it to do sheds, and we did blood trailing. And I ran into kind of a problem where she was decent at both, but not really good at both. They're just both two different things. I couldn't get her to range very far from me to shed hunt, because she was taught to stay close to me because we have to lead our blood dogs in Missouri. So it's kind of two opposite things. So I decided to opt and go for the blood trailing. So we trained her up on blood trailing and kind of got away from the sheds, because ultimately I would rather have a dog that would find dead deer than I would to find sheds for me.
Yeah, for sure.
But I haven't, yeah. And I've heard of guys with some really exceptional dogs that do well. I've just never been around it. I would like to, be something interesting to see for sure.
Yeah, I would like to. Just even experience once, because as you know, like, even if you've been on a pheasant hunt or a great waterfowl hunt, it's just neat to see a dog work like that and do what it was trained to do, because they're so faithful at what they were trained to do that it would be probably a riot to be able to shed hunt like that once.
Right.
So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I will let you get back to shooting some coyotes up there in South Dakota, Blake, but thanks for your time today, and glad we got to catch back up, man.
Heck yeah, it's fun, man. Stay in touch.
Will do. And
right,
boys and girls, you can find us every week on Unfiltered Outdoor app and iTunes. So, Blake, we'll talk again real soon. Thanks, man.
Absolutely, man. See ya.
See ya.